Hey everybody, Mike with Games Play Badly, and today on Session 0 I have Eric, who is the creator of a game called
Trials of Bren.
Now, you've probably seen him on Twitter talking to a bunch of people and his artwork. We actually get a chance to get into the nitty-gritty of the creation of the game and his motivations behind it. I can't wait for you to meet him. And I also have my Gem Firefly shirt on. He creates mugs and flags and all sorts of stuff. If you want something like this, go up to gemfirefly.com and purchase whatever you like, and at checkout put in our code BADLY15, BADLY15 at checkout for 15% off your order. Eric is right around the corner. That interview starts now. Hey Eric, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It took 3 weeks.
Taken a while.
It took 3 weeks.
Yeah, between me having COVID, a car accident, and something else, it's just been kind of a shit show the last 3 or 4 weeks. So
the squirts.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah.
So you're on to talk to me about your creation called the Trials of Bren.
Yep.
Why don't you? I know it's not a post-apocalyptic; it's a post-war setting.
Yeah, it was something, generally the idea of something that potentially could have been a post-apocalyptic. I think there's a lot of games already like that for the most part. Essentially, it takes place in a universe that was almost kind of, you know how in the Matrix they pretty much gave AI sentient life, full, and like they started having, concepts of like, well, if they have rights, why don't I have rights?
Sure.
So essentially, Trials of Bren takes place 10 years after a great war against advanced AI, because within probably like 120 year span, the 9 races in this world pretty much went through like the Industrial Revolution and all that really quick, like questionably quick. And because of that, people abused the advantages that they were given, and they didn't take into consideration that certain aspects such as you create life and then it begins to question its own masters or question its own creators. So essentially this takes place after that abuse has happened too long. All the towering world powers pretty much come to a close, and they're pretty much decimated because they're the closest to the most advanced technology that takes place. And the war ends in a ceasefire, almost miraculously. And now at this aspect, the people are kind of scared of, the advanced AIs, which is like, the androids, the war bots, things like HAL from, Space Odyssey. And they regress to older technologies, or they go back to the perspective of like, imagine if we were in a world right now where we decided, hey, I'm scared of how influential this thing has over my life. Like, imagine Alexa all of a sudden deploys a missile on your house. And, nowadays you're just like, you know what? I think the Xbox One can sit in the corner there and off. Right now, I'll just switch back to the first Xbox or the N64. Basically, that's kind of what the world is like at this point. Like, cell phone towers have minimal use. If you want to go on the internet, you have to go somewhere that's like closely monitored. You can't have it at home. So the aspect is people are scared. But at the same time, it's at an aspect now that these advanced AIs referred to as the mechanicals, they get to live on the borders of the lands that they took over while the people stay on theirs. Basically the rule, like the unspoken rule between both is, you come to our land, you're screwed. We come to yours, we're screwed, kind of thing. So, but at that point, it revolves more around the people who they now have to basically accept that like the world powers are pretty much gone. How do we fend for ourselves at this point? So, but at the same time, there's still the consequences of that war. There's still rogue AIs out there. They don't know if these AIs all of a sudden had like a singular patch that covered all of them, if it was one that they came up with, if it was someone or an organization that did it. And actually a friend of mine came up with this idea, and I have to give him credit. His name is Travis. He came up with the idea that if you have when there's solar flares coming from the sun and it hits Earth, it is probable that most electronics will cease from working. And maybe it came around the same time that solar flare, took place over the planet of Bren, which is Trials of Bren, takes place on the planet. And
well, there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Mystery solved.
Mystery solved. The plot thickens. And all these mechanicals all of a sudden decide that, to reroute, okay, if all of us are going to go, who's going to take, who would possibly be able to take care of us? So there's a lot of speculation as to why a ceasefire happened. And when the ceasefire happened, it came to that agreement that, like, we stay where we are, you stay where you are. If we're going to meet, it has to be under very special circumstances.
You're talking about basically the human race taking a planned obsolescence step to say,
Yeah.
we don't want it. We're eschewing technology because it screwed us.
Right.
And then you have the technology that screwed them saying, we don't know if we're going to be in power because we're susceptible to these solar flares and to mechanical issues. And so both of them are on very shaky ground, and the truce is probably pretty thin.
Yeah, it's a consistent, I don't want to say Cold War, because even Cold War had their little wars here and there, but essentially it's kind of it's a standoff, it's a kind of a standoff, but both sides don't really know
why the other one's standing off.
Yeah, basically. Yeah,
I get that. It's so the AI is looking at the humans going, they have something up their sleeve, and the humans are looking at the AI saying, hey, they have something up their sleeve. And it turns out they're both too scared of their own existence to move any further.
Yeah, and it's not just humans either, which is also what.
Right. So why don't you tell me more? So there's a myriad of races on Brad. Why don't you tell me a little bit more about those?
Yeah. So there's 9 races or lineages, because when I was making the game, like, there's this whole entire thing, even in, I think it's in Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder, they talk about don't use the term race, because there's a connotation behind it. Sure. So like some of them call them ancestries right now. Yeah, no, like I mean, like, you'll see me on Twitter saying races just because that's what most people are familiar with. It's not because I agree the word should be races. It's because lineages doesn't sound as familiar just yet, but like that's what they're referred to as in this game, lineages. The 9 lineages are obviously, they took some influence from certain cultures and whatnot, but mainly I also added them just because it depends what kind of role the player wants to play. Like, I came up, the first race obviously is the humans or Etherians, because since everybody's going to want to at least have the human race be involved in there somehow. Which is like a cobra race, very tall. I kind of came up with the idea of, I know there's some people out there that want to be vampirical, and cobras have this kind of urge about them that they have to feed on people. And the thing with this game too is when you choose which lineage you want to be, you pick an advantage related to that lineage, and then you also pick a hindrance. When you level up, you can choose to get rid of the hindrance, add another advantage, that kind of stuff. So you can choose progressive wise if you want your character to, not have a thirst for blood, every session possibly. But you can also, I also added advantages in there that it might work in your favor. Then, there's that as well. So the Beldonians are the Cobra race. I made a race referred to as the Golenites. I kind of came up with the idea of this race of people. Is going to be controversial what I'm probably going to say, but like kind of the concept of Native Americans, where there's not in the game itself, there's not too many that you would find, just because a lot of wars, the mechanicals took over certain areas that they lived in. And one little aspect I came up with was, do you know what a pangolin is?
Sounds awfully familiar.
It's the most poached animal in the world. It looks like an armadillo. They have beautiful scales on their back. They had this lineage of people. They have that on their back as well, which allows them that if they want to like get into a ball to protect them from a certain amount of damage per session, they can do that. And they're very capable hunters. So I decided to, yeah. So, and I'll be honest, that Pokemon has helped me a lot with coming up with some of these lineages. But then there's embryos, which is the bug people. I kind of like the idea of, there's these intelligent bug people, they can walk on all 6 or just the bottom 4. They can climb walls. And if they want to be like, hey, I'm going to be one of those, but a soldier, because a soldier has a move called Death from Above, that if, hey, you want to play a bug person that climbs a wall and then drops down on an enemy and causes a crap ton of damage, you can go ahead. In fact, in The short rule book that I have, one of the pre-made characters that I made is exactly that, because I know players are going to love the idea of climbing something and dropping. So
Sure.
yeah, then there's the, what's the next one? Obelisks or obelisks. This is one of the most picked races, lineages of this game. They're crustacean people. They can breathe underwater. They have the biggest range between height. They could be like 3 feet tall. They could be 8 feet tall.
Wow.
Yeah, and their lineage was treated as cattle at one point because people figure, you guys look like crab. We eat crab. So
and you're delicious.
So it came to a point where they actually, there's a whole entire story where a good majority of them fled to one area in the world of Bren, and then a Beldonian cobra actually taught them how to fight, and then they managed to expand their borders, and they got this, and they got their rights back. You know, they got the rights. You know, and apparently to this day, it's still legalized that if anyone is trying to pretty much kidnap an obelisk for their meat, that obelisk is right off the bat allowed to kill anyone in the room. So,
wow.
Yeah.
All right.
They take it seriously, but
yeah. So you have the obelisk, and what else?
See, then there's the Riazi, which, so this is a kind of a two-parter why I came up with this lineage. Riazi was actually the name of a spiritual teacher that my dad had, because my dad's from Iran. And he was very smart man. Taught my dad how to doing meditation techniques. Basically, if you know who Sadhguru is, he's a guru. He's essentially he's someone like that, essentially. And actually, he was assassinated in Sweden for being some sort of spiritual, basically there's people that saw him as a threat because he made people happy. But I like the name Riazi, so I took that into consideration. This is a race of sloth bear people. I came up with that idea because a lot of people like sloths. Nobody fucks with a bear. And I came up with the sloth idea because my brother is my brother loves sloths. So I just decided to insert that in there. And they are the race that I'm going to keep alternating between saying race and lineage, by the way. So I'm sorry.
It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. They are, if you start off with them, you can choose to have extra health and all that. They also require more food to eat because, they're heavier set. The average one is 7 to 9 feet tall. There's 3 more. Yeah. The next race is the Saruses, which is bird people. My grandpa was big on birds. Plus, I always like the concept of a character that you can play as that can glide,
sure,
as well as mimic a voice that they've heard before. So
that's a unique take on that. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, so if you wanted to play a character that has a raven or a parrot look to, you can basically make any bird you want if you're a Sarus. And if you wanted to make a mimicry attempt to be let's say you're behind a door and you're pretending, you're trying to steal from someone's house and you're really this close to being walked in on, you could sound like the person's kid or the person's parent and be like, what are you doing? And they run away. I don't know, something like that. Yeah. There's also the Valerans, which is the most picked lineage out of all of them. It's the fox people.
Oh, everyone likes the fox.
Everybody loves the fox. The fox is my favorite. The fox is my favorite animal. So
but I have a question. I do have a question for you. What does the fox say?
A fox has 90 different vocal noises that they can make.
You've obviously done your research.
I've done. Look, the fox is my favorite animal to the point where I realized I would never want one as a pet because they are.
You're smarter than most.
I'm smarter than most. There's a lot of people that be like, "Oh, the fox must be a nice pet." No, they're. If you have a backyard big enough, yeah, they're great pets. But if you are putting them in your house, they can't be housebroken. They have a scent to them. They steal everything, and they are loud. Especially ones, especially that are they're domesticated, domesticated as possible. They are loud all the time. Yeah. But the fox has been my favorite animal since I was a kid, so I decided to put a fox race in there, and that is probably the most picked lineage out of all of them. They have the cultural wise in the lore. They are the ones who are most likely to know another language. They're nocturnal, but they don't like water terrain areas, and because of a lot of upbringing. So I'll get into talks about prejudice and racism in the game a little bit later, just so people don't get the wrong idea.
Yeah, you do actually. I mean, you do actually warn fairly early on that some of these concepts are in the game, not because you're promoting them, but because that's what society is, where society's at in your particular genre of game. So, I mean, those are things that I think you laid out, or at least I caught it early enough where I was like, oh, okay, so you're going to hear some things that are going to sound antiquated and may even be cringeworthy, but it's not because you believe them, it's because it's kind of part of what the setting is.
Like there's certain, races or lineages that don't trust each other for, political or historical reasons.
Sure, sure.
And yeah, so because of this, the Valerians are often looked at as, thieves and whatnot. So eventually, one of the hindrances for them is they go into a shop and the shopkeeper's looking at them, even if they themselves are a Valerian. So there's that aspect. And I also do apologize if any of those come off as controversial. It's not what I'm aiming for. Then there's the Wukongians, which is the monkey people, because monkeys are fun. And
they're powerful.
They're really.
Oh my goodness. I mean, they're incredibly strong, dexterous. It's insane.
Oh yeah, and especially with them, like I made it in the game that they can climb pretty much anything they want. If they fall down somewhere, you can roll, even if it's like 200 feet, they know how to land. And if you roll a certain way, you either take half damage or you take no damage. So I came up with a lot. And when I was making this game, a buddy of mine who's actually helping me with the lore and all that, he even says, you added way too many races. And I'm like, yeah, we'll stop at 9. 9's a good number.
Well, those are what expansions are for, right?
Yeah. But I mean, that's one reason why I'm making Island 101, which is I have the original core rulebook, which is currently it's close to or over 400 pages. It still has some editing to do.
My.
Yeah, but then the Island 101, I'm trying to make sure that I cap it at most at 100 pages, because I remember talking to a few friends of mine, and I even did a post one time, and there was one responder who said, because I asked, would drive people to want to try a new RPG, one that they've never heard of. And one person says, just give me a nutshell version of it. I have too many things in the day going on to want to read a 500-page book.
Right, exactly. So why don't you talk about Island 101? So Island 101 is basically your scaled down version of Tales of Bren. And why don't you expound on that a little bit more?
Yeah, so Island 101, originally it was just going to be, hey, here's like maybe 4, just a few of the races, and that's what it is. It's only 4 of those lineages and 6 of those classes. I did cut out some of the weapon choices. I did come out some of the moves. I did even for the lineages, just because if you're given too many choices at once, especially if you're a game that you're not overly familiar with, it's intimidating. It's kind of like, if you're 8 years old and you meet someone who's a Star Wars fan,
right,
and they don't have the concept, it's an 8-year-old, don't pour the whole entire lore on them. I imagine even if the 8-year-old is a Star Wars fan, like that's still a lot of information. But even then, and a buddy of mine even said in the original core rulebook, he says, put the lore at the end of the book.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah,
get through the nuts and bolts, then you give them the meat and potatoes at the end. If they're really interested, they can learn as much as they want, or they can create their own.
Exactly. I mean, when you're doing a banquet, you start off with the little things at first.
Right.
So, and Island 101, I just finished drawing the map for Island 101. Basically, the idea is that this is a one shot, that it could be a game that could possibly end in one session or 2 or 3.
You have basically Island 101, which is a scaled down version of the game as a whole. Has basically half the races, some restrictions on classes, things like that. Now, how and when are you gonna release that for people to play?
I'm guesstimating, give it probably 2 to 3 months. But if it by the second or the third month comes around and the promise doesn't look promising, then I will give a very big apology and say wait another 1 or 2 months. So, but
it's going to be free anyway. So I mean, like, how can you complain about something that didn't show up on time for free?
Exactly.
It's a 2D6 base system. You use a D8, a D4, a D12 for hours, a D20 for random encounters. But I mean, your main die are really the 2D6.
The 2D6, D4, and D8. The other ones are treated more as optional, just because I know some people don't like the idea of being too open-ended with certain things. But I say, hey, if it's gonna make it a better game experience for you and your players, at least a suggestion is thrown in there.
Mhm.
But the main ones are going to be, you mainly roll 2d6, but you do use 1d4 for certain things, such as if you're falling, if you're attacking, and
Modifiers or buffs type thing.
modifiers or buffs. The d8 is more to kind of put the player and the GM at stress of, hey, you were hit with a fire attack, roll a 1d8 and see if you're getting the burned effect. And if you roll a 4 or less, you're burned. If you get a 5 or above, that's great for you. So
Right.
this game has what's referred to as a fate system.
I did see fates on the character sheet. I was kind of curious about that.
Yeah, and I'll admit I kind of came up with this idea mainly because Monster of the Week has luck, where if you have 7 luck points, but if you lose all of them, then you die. Now,
Ooh.
I've learned here's the thing, I've learned from the last 4 or 5 years when I was playing Monster of the Week with some players abused it. Like, they're just like, oh, I'm like 5 luck points away from death. I don't care. I decided to make up the ante, and players have actually told me, like, I like this. Like, it ups the stakes. It makes me think more like, okay, what equipment do I have? Should I prepare for this? That depending how the length of the game, like if it's 2.5 hours or less, if you lose 2 fate points, then you have to roll to see if you survive. Or if it's 2.5 or more hours that the game is going on, if you lose 3 fate points, it is like whether it's from combat or just anything, you have to roll to determine if you survive. You can also use a fate point to be like, hey, I didn't like that roll. Let's change it to a 12 and I'll mark a fate point. Okay. You realize if you lose 1 more fate point, you're probably going to die, right? Yeah, I'll take that risk.
Well, Eric, I appreciate you being on with me tonight.
Oh,
there's a
thank you.
lot. There's a lot to unpack from the standpoint. I think you actually have there's a great lore to your game. I'm actually inspired by it to think about things that I would do in it.
Yeah.
And that's the mark of a good game and a good creator in my book, at least for me, is something that makes me immediately think about what I would do. So I thank you for being on. I do have something stupid I do at the end of my videos, and it's called a quick fire challenge.
Okay.
So these are very hard hitting, deep delving questions that are going to ruin your possible marriage. Are you ready for this?
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay. Yeah, here we go.
All right. Cake or pie?
Cake.
What's your favorite cake?
Ice cream. Ice cream cake.
You have a favorite flavor of ice cream?
Vanilla.
So that leads into my next question, chocolate or vanilla?
Vanilla.
Are you a spring or a fall kind of person?
Fall. I hate anything close enough to showing that it's going to be hot weather. Forget it.
So you're not a hot weather kind of guy. You're because you're in the northeast.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty temperate weather there, yes?
I'm a walking heater. Like even in the winter, I'll go for walks in 30-degree weather like this. Like yeah. I do not do well with the heat.
So out of all of the gaming systems outside of your own that you've played, what do you think is your favorite?
If I had to say, I do like doing horror themed games because I do like to add tension. I do like to add, when I did Monster of the Week and Call of Cthulhu, I never like to put in predictable enemies. Like I don't put vampires or werewolves unless, there's a good reason to. I want the players to research what they're going into, but I don't want it to feel like homework. So if I had to say, it's kind of a tie between Call of Cthulhu and Monster of the Week.
Those are both. I've never played Monster of the Week. I've played Call of Cthulhu. So, and the funny thing is I talk to everybody all the time. They always mention Monster of the Week. I have never played it. So
it's worth it.
Yeah. No, I don't doubt it. I am going to have to try and play it now.
Yeah. I also tried reaching out to Evil Hat Productions at one point to be like, hey, do you want to try look into my game? And they're like, nah, doesn't fit our standards. I'm like, I understand. So it's my first rejection letter.
Can I just say congratulations for at least trying?
Yeah. Thank you. My first rejection letter. Yes.
Frame that, but when you become big and famous.
Yeah. Big and famous.
And out of all the classes that you have in your game, what would you consider to be your favorite?
I don't know, because it's like I know them way too well. As a player, I would probably go for medic, just because I like to be the support role, but I also like to be the surprise. I know exactly where to hit kind of character, because the medic has the capability to heal better than pretty much everybody else, make boosters, which can be like, okay, if you need a booster for +1 to your personality, here you go. Also, they have a move called Acupuncture, like ACU-puncher, yeah, which basically means they know where to hit on their target's body to give them a disadvantage. And I think
That's really creative, actually.
yeah, and I came up with the idea watching an acupuncture video, and
Hopefully that didn't happen to the person who was being acupunctured.
no, well, actually, it was kind of a combination of that, and I was also watching Avatar: Last Airbender at the time, and
Sure.
and there's a character in there that pretty much can just hit you in certain spot, and you basically like your arm doesn't work
What's
for the
her
rest.
name? Yeah.
Oh, Ty Lee.
Daily. Well, Eric, I appreciate you being on with me tonight. We've been talking for a while. I think you're a really good personality on Twitter. You're very supportive of everyone else. Everyone who's watching, make sure you're supporting Eric through his creation process. And when Island 101 comes out, I will be one of the first ones to download it.
I will let you know right off the bat.
Absolutely. It's rare that I get a chance to talk to someone who is in that creational journey. Normally when I talk to people, they've already created and it's already kind of ready, and we're just kind of talking about that. But I mean, it's part of being a creator, and it's what makes you unique and different. So thank you for coming on and sharing.
And thank you for having me.
I look forward to everything you're creating.
Thank you, and I'm looking forward to everything that you're creating as well. Like, I've watched many of your interviews, and
it's very nice of you. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I'm learning quite a bit. I'm learning quite a bit because
it's nice to know someone's watching.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we'll talk soon. You have a great night. Good to talk to you, and best of luck.
And thank you, and same to you.